The dusty road leading into Reno, Nevada seemed endless as Sienna Calloway squinted against the harsh afternoon sun, her knuckles white on the reins of the weathered stagecoach. The year was 1875, and the promise of a teaching position had drawn her westward from Boston to this rugged silver mining town nestled in the shadow of the Sierra Nevada mountains. As the coach rattled over the uneven terrain, she wondered if she had made the gravest mistake of her 22 years. "Almost there, miss," the driver called down. "Reno up ahead." Sienna nodded, though her stomach churned with uncertainty. The teaching position she had traveled so far to claim had been filled 3 days before her arrival, a fact the town's mayor had communicated with little sympathy when she'd arrived at his office yesterday. Now, with her savings dwindling and no prospects in sight, desperation clawed at her throat. The stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of Barton's General Store, and Sienna gathered her skirts to descend. Her trunk containing everything she owned in the world thudded to the ground beside her. "Thank you," she murmured to the driver, who tipped his hat before climbing back onto his perch. As the coach pulled away, Sienna stood alone on the dusty street, the afternoon sun beating down mercilessly. Her blue calico dress, once fresh and proper for travel, now hung limp with dust and sweat. She pulled a crumpled newspaper from her reticule and smoothed it out, scanning the column of advertisements she had circled in desperate hope. The bell above the general store door jingled, and an elderly woman emerged, her curious gaze settling on Sienna and her trunk. "You look lost, dearie," the woman said, approaching with a kind smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "New to Reno?" "Yes, madam," Sienna replied, straightening her shoulders. "I arrived yesterday for the teaching position, but it seems it was filled before I could reach town." The woman clicked her tongue sympathetically. "That's Margaret Thompson's doing. Woman's got connections with the school board. Shame, though, we could use some fresh blood around here." Sienna tried to mask her disappointment. "I'm seeking alternative employment now. I've experience as a governess, and I'm well educated." The woman's eyes brightened. "Well now, that's fortunate timing. Just yesterday, Eliza from the Silver Dollar Saloon was telling me about that Keegan Blackburn up at Pinecrest Ranch. Man's been advertising for help with his children for months." "Children?" Sienna asked, interest piqued despite her reservations about working on a ranch. "6 of them," the woman said, shaking her head. "Wife died birthing the youngest about 8 months back. Poor man's trying to run that cattle ranch and raise those children alone. Oldest can't be more than 12, youngest still in swaddling clothes. 6 children. The number made Sienna's head spin, but desperation left little room for hesitation. "Where might I find this Pinecrest Ranch?" she asked, straightening her bonnet. The woman pointed northward. 4 miles that way. Follow the creek past the big cottonwood stand. Can't miss it. But I ought to warn you," she lowered her voice. "Keegan Blackburn's got a reputation for being hard as granite. Hasn't let a single person stay on to help with those young'uns. Runs 'em off within days." "I'm not easily intimidated, madam," Sienna replied, though her heart fluttered nervously. "Would you know anyone who might transport me there?" An hour later, Sienna found herself perched on the back of a hay wagon driven by Mr. Barton himself, the general store owner who'd overheard her conversation with his wife. The afternoon sun had begun its descent behind the mountains, painting the landscape in golden hues that softened the harsh terrain. "That's Pinecrest ahead," Mr. Barton announced as they crested a small hill. Below them sprawled a modest ranch, a sturdy 2-story house with a wide porch, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the distant lowing of cattle drifted on the air. It looked peaceful enough, but Sienna couldn't shake Mrs. Barton's warning about the owner. The wagon rolled to a stop in the ranch yard, and almost immediately the front door burst open. A boy of about 12 raced out, followed by a slightly smaller boy. Both had tousled dark hair and wary expressions. "Pa ain't here," the older boy announced, keeping a cautious distance from the wagon. "He's out checking the herd. I've brought a lady interested in the position your pa's been advertising," Mr. Barton explained, helping Sienna down from the wagon. The boy's eyes narrowed as he assessed her from her dust-coated traveling dress to her city-made boots. "You don't look like you'd last a day out here, madam." Sienna squared her shoulders. "I've come to speak with your father about that. I'll let him be the judge." A baby's cry pierced the air from inside the house, quickly followed by what sounded like something crashing to the floor and a young girl's distressed call. The boy grimaced. "That's Abigail. She can't handle the baby and the twins at the same time." He turned to his brother. "Go help her, Samuel." As Samuel darted back inside, the older boy extended his hand with surprising formality. "I'm Thomas Blackburn, madam." "Sienna Calloway," she replied, impressed by his manners despite his initial rudeness. The baby's cries grew more insistent, joined now by what sounded like two children arguing. Thomas glanced anxiously at the house. "Your father will return soon?" Sienna asked. "Not till sundown," Thomas replied, "and the baby ain't been fed since noon." Sienna hesitated only briefly. "Mr. Barton, would you mind terribly leaving my trunk? I believe those children need assistance now." Mr. Barton looked uncertain. "Miss Calloway, perhaps you should wait for Mr. Blackburn's return. He's particular about—" "I'll deal with Mr. Blackburn when he arrives," Sienna interrupted firmly. "Right now, there's a hungry baby crying." After Mr. Barton reluctantly departed, Sienna followed Thomas into the house. The scene that greeted her was one of barely contained chaos. A girl of about 10, Abigail, she presumed, was attempting to rock a screaming red-faced infant while simultaneously trying to separate two identical boys of around 4 who were pulling at each other's hair. Samuel, who looked to be about 8, was frantically trying to clean up what appeared to be spilled milk and broken crockery on the kitchen floor. "Everyone stop," Thomas shouted, but his command went unheeded in the pandemonium. Sienna set down her reticule and removed her gloves. "Thomas, please take the twins outside for a moment." She turned to the girl struggling with the baby. "Abigail, I presume. I'm Miss Calloway. May I help with the little one?" The girl looked up with tear-filled eyes and wordlessly handed over the screaming infant. Sienna cradled the baby expertly, noticing immediately the soiled wrappings. "Samuel, is there clean linen for the baby?" she asked calmly. The boy nodded, pointing to a cupboard. "But Pa says we're running low." "We'll manage," Sienna assured him, already unwrapping the infant. "Abigail, is there milk warmed for the baby?" "We were heating it when the twins started fighting and knocked it over," Abigail explained, wiping her face with her sleeve. "Let's start again then," Sienna suggested, keeping her voice steady despite the chaos. "Samuel, please fetch fresh milk." "Abigail, find clean wrappings for your brother." 20 minutes later, the baby, whom she learned was named Joseph, was clean, fed, and sleeping peacefully in Sienna's arms. The twins, James and John, had been separated and set to the simple task of sorting beans at the kitchen table. Samuel was finishing the floor cleanup, while Abigail prepared a simple stew for supper under Sienna's guidance. Thomas, who had been watching with suspicious amazement, finally spoke. "How'd you do that? Get everyone quiet and working," Sienna smiled. "Organization and clear direction. Children need both." She glanced around the kitchen, noting the disarray and dust. "How long has it been since your father hired help?" 3 weeks, Thomas answered. Mrs. Peterson left after Pa yelled at her for changing the way Ma used to arrange the pantry. Before that was Mrs. Winters, who stayed 4 days, and before that Miss Jenkins, who cried when the twins put a snake in her bed. Sienna suppressed a smile at the mischievous glint in the boy's eyes. "I see. And your mother passed 8 months ago," Thomas confirmed, his expression shuddering. "Having Joseph." The front door suddenly slammed open, causing everyone in the kitchen to jump. Heavy boot steps crossed the wooden floor, and Sienna turned to face the imposing figure who filled the doorway. Keegan Blackburn stood well over 6 feet tall, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the fading daylight. Dust covered his clothing, and a week's growth of beard shadowed his sun-weathered face. His dark hair was pushed back from a high forehead, and his eyes, a startling clear blue, narrowed as they took in the scene in his kitchen. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice deep and rough as gravel. Before Sienna could answer, Thomas stepped forward. "This is Miss Calloway, Pa. Mr. Barton brought her out. She's here about the position." Keegan's penetrating gaze swept over Sienna, taking in her city clothes and the sleeping baby in her arms. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or suspicion. "I didn't agree to hire anyone today," he stated flatly. Sienna met his stare unflinchingly. "Mr. Blackburn, I arrived to find your baby unfed and your children in distress. I simply offered assistance." "We were managing fine," he growled, though his eyes flickered to the now peaceful baby and the relatively orderly kitchen. "Were you?" Sienna challenged quietly. "Your eldest was attempting to maintain order, but he's a child himself. They all are." Keegan's jaw tightened as he strode forward and carefully took Joseph from her arms. The tenderness with which the large, calloused hands cradled the infant caught Sienna by surprise. "I appreciate your concern, Miss Calloway, but we don't need charity. Thomas, see the lady out. I'm sure Mr. Barton is waiting to take her back to town." "Mr. Barton has already departed," Sienna informed him evenly. "And I'm not offering charity, Mr. Blackburn. I'm seeking employment." "I understand you've advertised for help with your children." Keegan's eyes narrowed again. "You don't look like you'd last a day out here." The echo of Thomas's earlier assessment made Sienna straighten her spine. "You'd be surprised at what I can endure, Mr. Blackburn. I'm educated, experienced with children, and not afraid of hard work." For a long moment he studied her, his expression inscrutable. Then, "You've got city written all over you. This is no place for a woman used to comforts." "Pa," Abigail interjected timidly, "Miss Calloway knows how to make the baby stop crying, and she's helping with supper." Keegan glanced at his daughter, his stern expression softening slightly. Then his gaze returned to Sienna, still assessing, still suspicious. "One night," he finally said gruffly. "You can stay in the spare room tonight since it's getting dark. In the morning I'll take you back to town." "And if I prove useful," Sienna pressed. A muscle twitched in Keegan's jaw. "We'll see." Without another word, he turned and carried the baby toward what Sienna assumed was his study, effectively dismissing her. Thomas gave her a look that mingled apology with grudging respect. "That went better than usual," he whispered. "At least he didn't send you packing immediately." "I'll take that as encouragement," Sienna replied, turning back to help Abigail with the stew. As darkness fell over Pinecrest Ranch, Sienna observed the Blackburn family over supper. Keegan said little, focused on ensuring his children ate properly, occasionally assisting the twins with cutting their meat or wiping a spill. Despite his gruff demeanor, there was an unmistakable gentleness in how he handled his children, especially baby Joseph, who remained in a wooden cradle near his father's chair. What the man clearly lacked was organization. The meal itself was simple but poorly prepared, the biscuits too hard, the stew under-seasoned. The kitchen showed signs of neglect, and from what little she'd seen of the rest of the house, cleaning had been haphazard at best. After the meal, Sienna helped clear the table and wash dishes alongside Abigail, while Keegan supervised the boys' preparations for bed. When she finally retired to the spare room, a small space that appeared to have once been a sewing room, Sienna sat on the narrow bed and considered her options. The position was far from ideal. Keegan Blackburn was clearly resistant to help. The ranch was isolated, and caring for 6 children while managing household duties would be exhausting. Yet as she listened to the creaking of the house settling for the night, punctuated by the occasional cry from baby Joseph down the hall, Sienna knew she had few alternatives. Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the soft golden light of dawn filtering through thin curtains. Sienna had slept poorly, awakened several times by Joseph's crying and the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. She rose quickly, splashed water on her face from the basin provided, and dressed in her second-best dress, a practical gray cotton with minimal embellishment. When she entered the kitchen, she found Thomas attempting to prepare breakfast while Keegan fed Joseph with a cloth-wrapped finger dipped in milk. The other children were in various states of dishevelment around the table. "Good morning," Sienna greeted them, immediately moving to take over the stove from Thomas, who looked relieved to relinquish the task. Keegan grunted in acknowledgement, but didn't look up from the baby. His hair was damp, suggesting he'd already been out to the pump, and his clean-shaven jaw revealed a strong profile that Sienna hadn't fully appreciated beneath yesterday's stubble. "I thought we might have proper porridge this morning," she suggested, assessing the meager contents of the pantry. "With the dried apples I saw on the shelf. The children usually have biscuits and bacon," Keegan stated, finally looking up. "Every day?" Sienna asked, unable to keep the disapproval from her voice. "It's filling," he defended. "It's also lacking in variety and nutrition," she countered, already reaching for the oats she'd spotted. "Growing children need more than just bread and meat, Mr. Blackburn." She felt his eyes on her back as she worked, but he said nothing further as she prepared a hearty breakfast. The children, however, watched with interest as she served up bowls of steaming porridge garnished with pieces of dried apple and a drizzle of honey she'd found tucked away in the pantry. "This is good," Samuel announced after his first spoonful, sounding surprised. "It's how Ma used to make it," Abigail said softly, giving Sienna a grateful look. Keegan's expression remained neutral as he ate, but he cleaned his bowl completely before rising from the table. "I need to check the south pasture today," he announced. "Thomas, you're responsible for your brothers and sister while I'm gone." "Mr. Blackburn," Sienna interjected, "I believe we agreed you'd take me to town this morning." He paused, his blue eyes finding hers. For a moment, something like uncertainty crossed his features before his expression hardened again. "The ranch can't wait," he stated. "I'll take you tomorrow." "And in the meantime," Sienna pressed. "In the meantime," he said slowly, "you seem to have made yourself useful. The children appear to respond to you." He shifted uncomfortably. "You can stay another night if you're willing." It wasn't an offer of employment, but it was a reprieve from immediate dismissal. Sienna nodded, understanding the concession for what it was. After Keegan departed, Sienna set about establishing order. She assigned age-appropriate chores to each child, starting with simple bed-making for the twins and progressing to more complex tasks for Thomas and Abigail. Between supervising the children, tending to Joseph, and tackling the mountain of neglected housework, the day passed in a blur of activity. By late afternoon, she had reorganized the pantry, scrubbed the kitchen to a respectable shine, and supervised the laundering of a week's worth of dirty clothes. The children, initially resistant to the unfamiliar structure, gradually fell into the rhythm she established. When Keegan returned as the sun was setting, he paused in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he surveyed his transformed home. The kitchen table was set for dinner, the floor was swept clean, and the delicious aroma of roast chicken filled the air. The children helped prepare supper, Sienna informed him, noting his surprise. Even the twins peeled potatoes, though I'll admit their technique needs refinement. A ghost of a smile touched Keegan's lips before quickly disappearing. "You've been busy." "There was much to be done," she replied simply. During dinner, Sienna observed how Keegan watched his children interacting with her the way Abigail sought her approval, how Samuel eagerly explained the new organization system for the firewood, even the twins' competitive requests for her attention. Only Thomas maintained a careful reserve, though even he seemed less hostile than the day before. After the younger children were put to bed, Sienna found Keegan on the front porch, staring out at the darkened landscape. She hesitated in the doorway, unsure if she was intruding. "The baby's asleep," she informed him quietly. "I've shown Abigail how to prepare his milk more consistently. It should help him settle better through the night." Keegan nodded without turning. "You've done more in a day than the last 3 women managed in their entire stays combined." Taking this as an invitation, Sienna stepped onto the porch and stood beside him, maintaining a proper distance. "Your children are bright and capable, Mr. Blackburn. They simply needed guidance and structure." He turned to face her then, the moonlight illuminating the weariness etched in his features. "Miss Calloway, I won't pretend this is an easy place to live. The work is endless, the comforts few, and he paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I'm not an easy man to work for." "I've been told that repeatedly." "By the 3 women who didn't last?" Sienna asked with a hint of challenge in her tone, something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "Among others." Sienna considered her next words carefully. "Mr. Blackburn, I need employment. You need help with your children and household. I propose a trial period 2 weeks. If at the end of that time either of us finds the arrangement unsatisfactory, I'll return to town with no complaints." Keegan studied her for a long moment, his gaze intense enough to make her heart quicken despite herself. "You're educated," he finally said. "Clearly from a good family. Why would you choose to bury yourself on a cattle ranch in the middle of Nevada?" Sienna straightened her shoulders. "My circumstances are my own, Mr. Blackburn, just as yours are yours. All that matters is whether I can do the job required." After another extended silence, he nodded once decisively. 2 weeks, room, board, and $10 a week. 15, Sienna countered, surprising herself with her boldness. "And Sunday afternoons to myself." Keegan's eyebrows rose, but after a moment the corner of his mouth twitched upward. 15 and Sunday afternoons, he agreed, "but I expect excellence, Miss Calloway. My children deserve nothing less." "On that, Mr. Blackburn, we are in complete agreement." The next morning, Sienna rose before dawn, determined to establish a routine that would bring order to the Blackburn household. She found Keegan already in the kitchen, coffee brewing on the stove as he reviewed what appeared to be ledgers by lamplight. He glanced up when she entered, surprise evident in his expression. "You're up early." "There's much to be done," she replied, moving to the stove to begin breakfast preparations. "I thought we might establish a proper schedule for the household. The children would benefit from consistency." Keegan watched her efficiently gather ingredients for a breakfast of johnnycakes and eggs. "You've done this before, managed a household." It wasn't a question, but Sienna answered anyway. "My father was a professor. After my mother died, I ran our household while completing my own studies." A professor's daughter, he mused. That explains the education. But not why you're in Nevada cooking breakfast for a rancher and his 6 children. Sienna cracked eggs into a bowl with more force than necessary. My father remarried last year. His new wife preferred I find my own path. Understanding darkened Keegan's expression. So you became a teacher. I trained as one, Sienna corrected, but the position I traveled here for was filled before my arrival. Keegan absorbed this information silently, then closed his ledger. The east pasture needs checking. I'll be back for midday meal. He paused at the door. The children usually rise with the sun. Joseph will need feeding soon. As if on cue, a thin wail echoed from upstairs. Sienna nodded, already moving to warm milk for the baby. We'll manage, Mr. Blackburn. The days fell into a pattern. Sienna rose before dawn to prepare breakfast and set the day's tasks in motion. Keegan would depart for ranch work, sometimes taking Thomas with him to learn the cattle business. The younger children were assigned chores appropriate to their ages, with lessons in reading and arithmetic worked into the daily routine. By the end of the first week, the transformation of Pinecrest Ranch was remarkable. The house gleamed with cleanliness. Meals were served promptly and with increasing variety, and even the children's clothing showed improvement, mended tears, buttons replaced, and everything laundered regularly. More surprising was the change in the children themselves. The twins, while still mischievous, directed their energy toward productive tasks rather than destruction. Samuel, previously withdrawn, revealed a keen mind and interest in books. Abigail blossomed under Sienna's guidance, learning household skills with enthusiasm. Baby Joseph, perhaps most significantly, began sleeping through the night, his improved feeding schedule and care resulting in a happier, more contented infant. The dark circles under Keegan's eyes gradually lightened as he too benefited from more regular sleep. Only Thomas maintained a certain wariness around Sienna, though even he had begun to demonstrate grudging respect for her capabilities. On the Sunday afternoon of her first week, as she prepared to take her promised time off, she found him watching her from the porch. "You planning to leave?" he asked bluntly. Sienna paused in adjusting her bonnet. "I'm going for a walk, Thomas. I'll be back before supper as I promised your father." The boy's eyes narrowed skeptically. That's what Mrs. Peterson said too. Then she packed her bags while Pa was checking the North Ridge. Understanding dawned on Sienna. "You think I'm abandoning you?" Thomas shrugged with forced nonchalance. "Wouldn't be the first time somebody did." Sienna regarded him thoughtfully. "Thomas, I gave your father my word 2 weeks. I don't break my promises." "Ma promised she wouldn't die," he muttered, kicking at the porch post. "She broke that one." The raw pain in his voice caught Sienna off guard. She stepped closer, though she knew better than to touch this wounded boy without invitation. "Your mother didn't choose to leave you, Thomas," she said gently. "She would have stayed if she could have." "You didn't know her," he challenged, though his voice wavered. "No," Sienna agreed, "but I know she must have loved you very much to create such a beautiful family. And I know she would be proud of how you've helped care for your brothers and sister." Thomas blinked rapidly, turning away to hide the tears that threatened. "Just be back by supper," he mumbled. "Pa gets worried when people are late, even if he doesn't say so." Sienna's walk took her along the creek that bordered Pinecrest property. The afternoon was warm but pleasant, with a gentle breeze rustling the cottonwood leaves. She found a smooth boulder beside the water and sat, removing her shoes to dip her tired feet in the cool stream. For the first time in a week, she allowed herself to truly consider her situation. The work was indeed endless and physically demanding, more so than any position she'd held before. Yet there was satisfaction in bringing order to chaos, in seeing the immediate results of her efforts reflected in the children's well-being. And then there was Keegan Blackburn himself. The man remained largely a mystery, spending most daylight hours working the ranch. At meals and in the evenings, he was attentive to his children but reserved with her, maintaining a careful professional distance despite living under the same roof. Occasionally, though, she caught glimpses beneath that stern exterior, the tender way he cradled Joseph, his patient instruction as he taught Thomas about cattle breeding, the quiet pride when Abigail showed him her improved handwriting. In those unguarded moments, Sienna saw a man devoted to his family, bearing a burden of grief and responsibility that would have crushed many. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the approach of hoofbeats until a horse and rider appeared around the bend of the creek. Startled, she hurriedly withdrew her feet from the water as Keegan Blackburn reined his chestnut gelding to a stop nearby. "Miss Calloway," he greeted her, tipping his hat. "I'm checking the fence line. Didn't expect to find you here." Sienna scrambled to her feet, embarrassed to be caught in such an informal posture. "The creek is lovely. I thought to rest here a while before returning." Keegan dismounted, letting his horse drink from the creek. "The children are well." "Yes, Abigail is watching the little ones. Thomas is keeping an eye on them all." He nodded, seemingly unsurprised by her capable organization even in her absence. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the sounds of water over stones and the horse's occasional snort. "My wife loved this spot," Keegan finally said, his voice so quiet Sienna almost missed the words. "Used to bring the children here for picnics in summer." It was the first time he'd voluntarily mentioned his late wife. Sienna responded carefully, "It's a perfect place for picnics. Perhaps when the weather is warmer, we might bring the children here again." Keegan looked at her sharply, then away, his profile rigid against the afternoon light. Sarah would have liked that. She always said children need beauty as well as bread. "She sounds like a wise woman," Sienna offered gently. "She was," his voice roughened. "Too good for the life I gave her, too gentle for the hardships." Sienna took a risk. "Yet she chose you." Keegan's laugh held no humor. She was 19 and full of romantic notions about ranch life. Reality proved harsher than her dreams. "Did she regret it?" Sienna asked quietly. He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice had softened. "No, she loved the children too much for regrets." Even at the end, when the midwife said another birth would kill her, Sarah insisted on bringing Joseph into the world. "She sounds brave," Sienna said, her heart aching for the family's loss. "Brave and stubborn," Keegan agreed, a ghost of fondness in his tone. He seemed to catch himself then, straightening as if remembering who he was speaking to. "You should head back before the light fades. The path can be treacherous in darkness." Sienna recognized the dismissal and nodded, slipping her feet back into her shoes. "Will you join us for supper, Mr. Blackburn?" "I've more fences to check," he replied, already mounting his horse. "Don't wait for me." As he rode away, Sienna watched his straight-backed figure until it disappeared around the bend. The glimpse into his grief had been brief, but revealing a pain still raw after 8 months. A guilt he carried like another burden on his already burdened shoulders. That evening, after the children were settled in bed, Sienna sat by lamplight in the kitchen, mending one of the twins' shirts. The sound of the front door opening announced Keegan's return, later than usual. She heard him check on each child, his footsteps quiet on the stairs, before he appeared in the kitchen doorway. "You should be resting," he said, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg. "Tomorrow's soon enough for mending." "I find it relaxing," Sienna replied, setting another neat stitch. "There's stew keeping warm if you're hungry." Keegan hesitated, then moved to serve himself a bowl. He sat across from her at the table, the silence between them oddly comfortable as he ate and she sewed. "You're good with them," he said suddenly. "Better than anyone since Sarah." Sienna looked up, surprised by the admission. "They're wonderful children, Mr. Blackburn. You've raised them well under difficult circumstances." He shook his head. "I've kept them fed and clothed. That's about all I've managed." His eyes met hers across the table. "You've done more in a week than I've accomplished in months." "Children need different things from their mother and father," Sienna said carefully. "You provide security, stability, a model of hard work and integrity. Those are invaluable." Keegan's expression shifted, something like hope briefly lighting his features before being shuttered away. "Your 2 weeks are half gone, Miss Calloway." "Yes," she acknowledged, uncertain where he was leading. He set down his spoon, his gaze direct. "I'd like you to stay on, permanently or at least longer. The children need you." The request caught her off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. "And you, Mr. Blackburn? Do you need me as well?" The question hung in the air between them, more revealing than she'd intended. Keegan's eyes widened slightly before his expression closed again. "This ranch needs a woman's touch," he said carefully, "and 6 children need mothering. I can offer secure employment, a home, and fair wages." It wasn't the answer part of her had hoped for, but it was honest. Sienna nodded slowly. "I'll consider it, Mr. Blackburn." As the 2nd week progressed, Sienna found herself increasingly drawn into the rhythm of ranch life. She began accompanying Abigail to the chicken coop each morning, learning how to collect eggs without disturbing the hens. The vegetable garden, neglected since Sarah's death, became her project in spare moments, with the children eagerly helping to clear weeds and prepare soil for planting. On Wednesday, an unexpected thunderstorm swept in from the mountains. Keegan and Thomas returned drenched and chilled from moving cattle to higher ground. Sienna ordered them both into dry clothes while she prepared hot coffee for Keegan and cocoa for Thomas, along with bowls of hearty bean soup. Later that evening, as wind and rain lashed at the windows, she found Keegan in his study, attempting to soothe a fussing Joseph. The baby, disturbed by the storm, refused to settle. "May I?" Sienna offered from the doorway, holding out her arms. Keegan relinquished the infant with visible relief. "He's been like this for an hour. Nothing calms him." Sienna cradled Joseph against her shoulder, humming softly as she swayed. To both their surprise, the baby's cries gradually subsided into hiccuping breaths, then silence as he nestled against her neck. "How do you do that?" Keegan asked, genuine wonder in his voice. Sienna smiled. "He associates me with feeding and comfort. It's not magic, just familiarity." Keegan watched her with the baby, his expression softening in the lamplight. "You would have made a fine mother, Miss Calloway." The words, spoken simply, caused an unexpected ache in Sienna's chest. "Perhaps someday," she replied, keeping her tone light despite the sudden tightness in her throat. Keegan seemed about to say more when a particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows, followed by a crash from upstairs. They exchanged alarmed glances before Keegan bolted for the stairs, Sienna following with Joseph still in her arms. They found the twins huddled together in their bed, wide-eyed with fear as rain poured through their now broken window. A large branch had crashed through the glass, allowing wind and water into the room. "Everyone all right?" Keegan demanded, quickly checking the boys for injuries. "We're scared, Pa," John whispered, while James nodded emphatically beside him. "You're safe," Keegan assured them, already moving to examine the damage. "The tree branch broke the glass, that's all." "They can't stay in here tonight," Sienna observed, noting the water already soaking the floor and bedding. "And that window needs covering before the whole room is flooded." Keegan nodded grimly. I'll get tools and boarding from the barn, can you? I'll move the twins to my room for tonight, Sienna assured him. Joseph's cradle is there already. We'll manage. By midnight, the broken window was securely boarded, though rain continued to batter the house. The twins were finally asleep in Sienna's bed, with Joseph slumbering in his cradle nearby. Sienna herself prepared to spend the night in the rocking chair, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. A soft knock at the door preceded Keegan's entrance, his expression apologetic as he took in her makeshift sleeping arrangement. "This won't do," he murmured. "You can't sleep in a chair all night." "I've managed with less," Sienna assured him. "The boys needed their rest more than I need a bed." Keegan shook his head. "Sarah's sewing room has a daybed. It's small but better than a chair. Let me show you." The sewing room was adjacent to the master bedroom, a cozy space with shelves of fabric and a small window overlooking the eastern pasture. The daybed, while narrow, looked infinitely more comfortable than the rocking chair. "This is perfect," Sienna said gratefully. "Thank you." Keegan lingered in the doorway, watching as she set down the small lamp he'd provided. In the soft light, with her hair loosened from its usual strict arrangement, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "You've done well today," he said quietly. "With the storm, the children, everything." Sienna felt warmth bloom in her chest at the unexpected praise. "We weathered it together, Mr. Blackburn." "Keegan," he corrected, so softly she almost missed it. "After all this, you might as well use my given name." Their eyes met across the small room, and something shifted in the air between them, a recognition, perhaps, of boundaries beginning to blur. "Good night, Keegan," Sienna tested the name, finding she liked the feel of it on her tongue. "Good night, Sienna," he returned, the rare smile that briefly touched his lips transforming his entire face before he turned and quietly closed the door. The final days of Sienna's trial period passed with remarkable swiftness. The storm had cleared, leaving behind washed clean skies and cooler temperatures. The broken window was properly repaired by a glazier from town whom Keegan had summoned, and ranch life returned to its routine. Except nothing felt routine to Sienna anymore. Since the night of the storm, subtle changes had altered the atmosphere at Pinecrest. Keegan sought her input on household decisions, lingered longer at the breakfast table, and occasionally joined her and the children for their afternoon reading sessions. The formal Miss Calloway had been permanently replaced with Sienna, spoken in tones that grew increasingly warm. For her part, Sienna found herself watching for Keegan's return each evening, taking extra care with meals she knew he particularly enjoyed, and treasuring the rare moments when his reserve fell away to reveal the thoughtful, intelligent man beneath. On the final evening of her 2-week trial, after the children were asleep, Keegan invited her to join him on the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the vast Nevada sky. "You've transformed this place," he began, leaning against the porch railing. "The house, the children, everything runs smoothly. Even Thomas has stopped scowling quite so much." Sienna smiled, wrapping her shawl more tightly against the evening chill. "He's a good boy. He just needed to trust that I wasn't going to disappear." "And are you?" Keegan asked, turning to face her fully. Going to disappear, the question hung between them, weighted with significance beyond a simple employment arrangement. Sienna considered her answer carefully. "That depends," she replied honestly. "On what?" "On whether I'm truly needed here. Whether I belong." Keegan stepped closer, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. "You are needed, Sienna, more than I can properly express." "By the children," she clarified, needing to understand exactly what he was offering. He hesitated, conflict evident in his eyes. "Yes, by the children, but also." He trailed off, seemingly unable to find the right words. Sienna took a risk, moving closer until barely a foot separated them. "I'll stay if you'll let me, Keegan. Not just as a governess or housekeeper, but as someone who cares deeply for this family." All of this family. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by what looked like cautious hope. "I have nothing to offer but hard work and 6 children who need mothering," he said roughly. "You deserve more than a widower struggling to hold his ranch together." "Perhaps you should let me decide what I deserve," Sienna countered gently. "I've found something here I never expected: purpose, belonging, and a family that needs me as much as I need them." Keegan's hand lifted tentatively to touch her cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle against her skin. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he admitted quietly. "After Sarah died, I believed that part of me died with her. And now," Sienna whispered, hardly daring to breathe, "now I find myself looking forward to mornings because you'll be at the breakfast table," he said, his voice low and intense. "I ride home faster in the evenings knowing you'll be waiting. You've brought light back to this house, Sienna. To all of us." The admission, so clearly difficult for this proud, reserved man, moved her deeply. Sienna covered his hand with her own, turning her face slightly to press a kiss to his palm. "Then I'll stay," she promised, "for as long as you want me." Keegan's other arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. "That might be a very long time," he warned, though his eyes had brightened with something that looked remarkably like joy. "I'm counting on it," Sienna replied, smiling up at him as he lowered his head to claim her lips in a kiss that felt like coming home. The following morning, Sienna and Keegan gathered the children in the sitting room before breakfast. 6 pairs of eyes regarded them with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. "Miss Calloway and I have something to discuss with you," Keegan began, standing beside Sienna with newfound confidence. "Her 2-week trial period has ended." Thomas immediately tensed, his expression closing as if preparing for bad news. The twins clutched each other's hands while Abigail's lower lip trembled slightly. Samuel looked between his father and Sienna with shrewd assessment, and baby Joseph, perched on Sienna's lap, babbled obliviously. "I've asked Miss Calloway to stay with us permanently," Keegan continued, "not as an employee but as part of our family." Confusion registered on the older children's faces. Abigail was the first to understand, her eyes widening. "Like a new ma?" she whispered, hope and uncertainty warring in her voice. Keegan knelt to be at eye level with his seated children. "No one will ever replace your mother," he said firmly. "Sarah will always be your ma and will always honor her memory." "But Miss Calloway makes you smile again," Samuel observed quietly. "Like ma used to." Keegan's expression softened as he glanced up at Sienna. "Yes, she does." "So you're getting married?" Thomas demanded, his tone challenging despite the flicker of hope in his eyes. "If Miss Calloway will have me," Keegan confirmed, "and if you children approve." This last condition clearly surprised the older children, who exchanged glances as they realized their father was genuinely seeking their blessing. "Do we get a vote?" James asked eagerly. "This isn't an election," Keegan replied with unexpected humor, "but your feelings matter to both of us." Abigail was the first to move, rising from her chair to stand before Sienna. "Will you be our mother now?" she asked directly, her young face solemn. Sienna shifted Joseph to one arm so she could take Abigail's hand. "I would be honored to be your mother, Abigail, but I know I'm not replacing the mother you lost. I hope to be someone who loves you just as much in my own way." Abigail considered this, then nodded decisively. "I think Ma would like that. She always said Pa was terrible at combing hair." A ripple of laughter broke the tension, and even Keegan smiled at his daughter's practical assessment. Samuel stood next. "You make good Jonna cakes," he stated seriously. "And you fixed my book when the pages came loose. I vote yes." The twins, never ones for prolonged deliberation, tumbled forward together. "We like you," John announced. "You don't yell when we get dirty." "And you tell the best bedtime stories," James added. All eyes turned to Thomas, who remained seated, his expression guarded. "What about when you have your own babies?" he finally asked Sienna. "Will you still want us then?" The question, so nakedly revealing the boy's deepest fear, broke Sienna's heart. She passed Joseph to Keegan and moved to kneel before Thomas, taking both his hands in hers. "Thomas, listen to me carefully," she said, holding his gaze steadily. "You and your brothers and sister are already in my heart. Nothing and no one will ever change that. If God blesses us with more children someday, they won't replace you, they'll just be more people for all of us to love." Thomas studied her face as if searching for any sign of insincerity. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him, for he finally nodded once sharply. "Okay," he said quietly. "But you have to promise not to die having babies like Ma did." Keegan made a choked sound behind them, but Sienna maintained her composure. "I promise to take every precaution, Thomas. I want to be here to see you grow into the fine man you're becoming." The tension visibly drained from the boy's shoulders, and he managed a small, genuine smile, the first Sienna had seen from him. "Then I guess it's okay." The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the Reno church, a simple ceremony attended by the children, the Bartons from the general store, and a handful of neighboring ranchers. Sienna wore a cream-colored dress that Abigail and she had worked on together, adapting one of Sarah's old patterns. Keegan, clean-shaven and uncomfortable in his best suit, waited at the altar with a mixture of nervousness and determination. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Keegan's kiss was tender but brief, mindful of their young audience. The twins cheered anyway, causing laughter to ripple through the small congregation. The wedding supper back at Pinecrest was a community affair, with neighboring wives bringing dishes to supplement what Sienna and Abigail had prepared. As twilight fell, guests gradually departed, leaving the new family alone together for the first time. Keegan found Sienna in the kitchen, putting away the last of the dishes while humming softly to herself. He slipped his arms around her waist from behind, drawing her against his chest. "Wife," he murmured against her ear, testing the word with evident satisfaction. Sienna turned in his embrace, looping her arms around his neck. "Husband," she returned, smiling up at him. "The children are finally asleep," he informed her. "Even the twins, though they fought it mightily." "Too much excitement and cake." "And Joseph, fed, changed, and sleeping like an angel," Keegan confirmed, "though I suspect that won't last the night." Sienna laughed softly. "Probably not, but we'll manage." Keegan's expression grew serious as he gazed down at her. "I never thought I'd find happiness again, Sienna. After Sarah died, it seemed like the light went out of everything." "I know," she said softly, touching his cheek. "Grief takes its own time. But you," he shook his head in wonderment, "you walked into our chaos and didn't run. You saw 6 motherless children and a broken man and somehow found something worth staying for." "I found everything worth staying for," Sienna corrected gently. "A family, a purpose, a man of integrity and strength who loves his children fiercely." Keegan lowered his forehead to rest against hers. "I didn't know how to love again," he confessed. "Didn't think I deserved to." "Love isn't about deserving," Sienna told him. "It's about opening your heart, even when it's scarred. It's about risk and faith and choosing each other every day." "I choose you," he said simply. "Today and all our tomorrows." When he kissed her this time, there was no audience to consider, no hesitation in how he gathered her close, one hand tangling in her loosened hair as his mouth claimed hers with newfound confidence. As the seasons changed, Pinecrest Ranch flourished under the care of its expanded family. The vegetable garden Sienna had started yielded a bountiful harvest that kept their root cellar stocked for winter. The children thrived with the stability and love that now filled their home. Thomas gradually shed his protective shell, revealing a thoughtful young man with a natural aptitude for ranching. Under Keegan's patient guidance, he developed skills that would one day make him a fine rancher in his own right. Abigail blossomed into Sienna's eager apprentice in household matters, while developing her mother's talent for sketching and painting. Samuel's love of books led Sienna to establish a small library in the corner of the sitting room, with titles ordered from catalogs and brought by post from San Francisco. The twins, while still mischievous, channeled their energy into caring for the farm animals, showing particular talent with the horses. Baby Joseph took his first steps on a crisp autumn day, toddling from Sienna's outstretched arms to Keegan's waiting hands as the entire family cheered his achievement. His first word was "Ma," directed unequivocally at Sienna, bringing tears to her eyes and a look of profound peace to Keegan's face. Winter brought its challenges, blizzards that isolated the ranch for days, illness that swept through the children before Sienna's careful nursing restored health, and the ever-present worry of cattle surviving the harsh Nevada cold. Yet even in the darkest days, the warmth within Pinecrest's walls sustained them. On a snowy evening in February, as Keegan returned from checking the barn one last time before bed, he found Sienna sitting alone by the fire, her hand resting thoughtfully on her abdomen. "The children asleep?" he asked, removing his heavy coat and boots. Sienna nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "All peaceful. Even the twins didn't argue about bedtime tonight." Keegan settled beside her on the sofa, drawing her against his side as he had grown accustomed to doing in the quiet evenings after the children were asleep. These moments had become precious to them, both a time to talk, plan, or simply enjoy each other's company without interruption. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Tired, a bit," she admitted, "but mostly thinking." Something in her tone made him study her more closely. "Thinking about what?" Sienna took his hand and placed it over her own on her stomach. "About how Pinecrest might need another bedroom in about 7 months. Keegan went utterly still, his eyes widening as comprehension dawned. "Sienna," he breathed. "Are you saying we're going to have a baby?" she confirmed, her eyes shining with joy and a hint of nervousness. "Dr. Morrison confirmed it when I visited town yesterday." For a moment, Keegan's expression was unreadable, and Sienna felt a flicker of uncertainty. Then his face transformed with a smile of such radiance it took her breath away. "A baby," he repeated in wonder, his hand spread protectively over her still flat abdomen. "Our baby." The tenderness in his voice banished any lingering concern. "You're happy then?" she asked. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," Keegan replied, gathering her into his arms. "But Sienna," his expression grew serious, "after what happened with Sarah, I need to know you'll be careful, that you'll let me get you whatever help you need." Sienna cupped his face between her palms. "I've already spoken with Dr. Morrison about everything. He believes I'm in excellent health and he's arranged for a midwife to check on me regularly as the time approaches. I promise I'm taking every precaution." Relief softened his features. "Good. I can't lose you, Sienna. The children can't lose another mother." "You won't lose me," she assured him. "This baby will have both parents to love and guide it, along with 6 wonderful older siblings." As winter gave way to spring, and spring blossomed into summer, Sienna's condition became increasingly evident. The children received the news with varying reactions: excitement from Abigail and the twins, thoughtful acceptance from Samuel, quiet concern from Thomas that gradually eased as he observed Sienna's continuing good health, and oblivious joy from Joseph, who simply enjoyed patting her growing belly. Keegan became increasingly protective, hiring additional hands for the ranch work so he could spend more time close to home. The extra help allowed Thomas more responsibility in ranch operations, a development that filled the boy with pride. On a sweltering August day, with the scent of sagebrush heavy in the air, Sienna's labor began. The midwife was summoned from town, and Keegan dispatched the older children to the Bartons' care, keeping only baby Joseph at home under Abigail's watchful eye. The labor progressed steadily through the afternoon and into evening. Unlike the frantic, terrified birthing that had claimed Sarah's life, this delivery unfolded with measured care under the midwife's experienced guidance. Keegan refused to leave Sienna's side, supporting her through each contraction, wiping her brow, and murmuring encouragement when her strength flagged. As midnight approached, their daughter entered the world with a robust cry that echoed through the ranch house. The midwife cleaned and wrapped the infant before placing her in Sienna's weary arms. "She's perfect," Sienna whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face as she counted tiny fingers and toes. Keegan, overcome with emotion, could only nod as he gazed at his wife and newborn daughter. The shadow of Sarah's death that had haunted him throughout Sienna's pregnancy finally lifted as he beheld the miracle before him: his wife, tired but radiant with health, and their child, pink and vigorous in her first hours of life. "Catherine Sarah Blackburn," Sienna suggested softly. "For your mother and for Sarah." Keegan's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he nodded. "It's beautiful, she's beautiful." He leaned down to press a reverent kiss to Sienna's forehead. "Thank you. For Catherine?" Sienna asked with a tired smile. "For everything," Keegan replied simply. "For coming to Pinecrest when we needed you most. For loving children who weren't yours. For giving me a reason to believe in tomorrow again." The following day, the children returned home to meet their new sister. Thomas, who had maintained a certain distance throughout Sienna's pregnancy, was the last to approach the cradle where Catherine slept. "She's so small," he observed quietly. "But strong," Sienna assured him from where she rested in bed nearby. "Like her big brother." Thomas studied the infant thoughtfully. "Joseph won't be the baby anymore." "No," Sienna agreed, "but he'll always be special, just as each of you is special in your own way." The boy nodded, then turned to face her directly. "I was scared," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "That you'd die like Ma did." Sienna held out her hand to him, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it. "I know, Thomas. I'm sorry you had to carry that fear. But you didn't die," he said, as if still trying to accept this fact. "You promised you wouldn't, and you didn't." "I keep my promises," Sienna reminded him gently. "Just like I promised I'd stay if your father would let me." A tentative smile touched the boy's lips. "I'm glad you stayed, and I'm glad Catherine's here too." As autumn painted the Nevada landscape in gold and crimson, life at Pinecrest settled into a new rhythm that accommodated their youngest member. Catherine proved to be a content baby with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. On a crisp October evening, as the first anniversary of Sienna's arrival at Pinecrest approached, Keegan found her on the front porch, Catherine sleeping against her shoulder while she watched the older children playing in the yard before supper. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, joining her on the porch swing. Sienna smiled, leaning into his side as his arm circled her shoulders. "I was just thinking about that first day, arriving with nothing but a trunk and desperate hope." Keegan chuckled. "I was so determined not to let you stay. So certain no woman would want this life." "And now?" she prompted. He gazed out at their children, Thomas teaching Samuel to throw a lasso, Abigail supervising as the twins took turns giving Joseph rides on their backs, all of them laughing in the golden light of sunset. "Now I thank God every day for your stubbornness," Keegan replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "For the woman who said I'll stay if you'll let me and meant it with her whole heart." "The best decision I ever made," Sienna murmured, turning her face up to his. "Choosing this family. Choosing you." As Keegan's lips met hers in a tender kiss, baby Catherine stirred against her shoulder, letting out a contented sigh as if in agreement. Around them, the ranch settled into evening, cattle lowing in distant pastures and chickens clucking their way to roost. The scent of Abigail's apple pie drifted from the kitchen, and the children's laughter floated on the cooling air. From desperate beginnings had grown this precious, imperfect, beautiful life built day by day through commitment and love, strengthened through shared joys and sorrows, and richer than anything Sienna could have imagined when she'd first set foot on Pinecrest soil. "Pa, Miss Sienna." Samuel called from the yard. "Can we eat supper outside tonight? Like a picnic?" Keegan met Sienna's questioning glance with a smile and a nod. "Just this once," he called back, rising to help carry food outside. As the family gathered on blankets spread across the yard, passing plates and sharing stories of their day, Sienna looked around at these people who had become her world, the husband who had opened his wounded heart to love again, the children who had accepted her into their lives, the baby daughter sleeping peacefully in her cradle nearby. This was home. This was belonging. This was the answer to prayers she hadn't even known to pray. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky above Pinecrest Ranch, Sienna Blackburn knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she was meant to be.